The desert sun hung low, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt of Route 47, where the air shimmered with heat and the faint scent of sagebrush. 11-year-old Caleb hunched over his bike's handlebars, pedaling furiously along the shoulder, his backpack bouncing against his thin frame. He'd been riding home from the edge of town, where the old gas station's pumps stood like rusted sentinels. When he noticed it, the road sign for the upcoming junction had been twisted, its arrow pointing not east toward the highway, but veering sharply north into the barren flats. Caleb slowed, squinting. That wasn't right. He'd passed this spot 100 times with his dad, memorizing the turns like a map etched in his mind. His heart quickened. Something felt off, like the whisper of wind before a storm. Further down, the rumble grew, a low thunder that vibrated through the ground. Caleb glanced back, his eyes widening as a convoy of motorcycles crested the rise behind him, their chrome gleaming like polished steel under the dying light. There were dozens, maybe 50 strong leather-clad riders in a tight formation, engines snarling in unison. At their head rode Marcus Hale, a man whose face bore the deep lines of battles long past, his grey-streaked beard framing eyes that had seen too much loss. Marcus gripped the handlebars of his vintage Harley, the one he'd rebuilt after the war, its black paint chipped from years of relentless miles. He wasn't leading this ride for glory. It was a promise. One whispered in a hospital room years ago to a dying brother in arms, protect the roads, guard the lost, no matter the cost. The boy froze as the lead bikes closed in, dust swirling in their wake. He waved his arms wildly, shouting over the roar, but the wind swallowed his voice. Panic clawed at him. Those signs, they were wrong, deliberate. Leading straight into the ambush point he'd overheard whispers about in town. Crooked officials and rival crews had been tampering with markers, setting traps for outsiders like these riders. Caleb's dad had warned him, "Eyes open, son. The desert hides teeth." If these bikers followed the signs, they'd ride into a choke point, rocks rigged to tumble, shadows waiting with intent. He couldn't let that happen. Dropping his bike, Caleb sprinted toward the convoy's edge, his sneakers kicking up gravel. Marcus spotted the kid first, a small figure darting like a jackrabbit across the road. He signaled with a gloved fist, and the pack slowed, engines idling to a guttural purr. The riders fanned out, a wall of denim and determination, their faces etched with the quiet vigilance of men who'd chosen family over blood. "What's the trouble, kid?" Marcus called, killing his engine and swinging a leg over the saddle. His voice was gravel rough, tempered by years of smoke and silence, but there was a warmth in it, the kind forged in foxholes and forgotten oaths. Caleb panted, pointing frantically at the sign. "It's wrong. The arrow. It's been turned. That way leads to the flats, not the highway. There's trouble waiting. I heard 'em talking in town. Please, you gotta believe me." His eyes wide with the fear of a child who'd already lost too much. His mom to illness, his dad to long hauls that never brought him back, pleaded for trust. The other riders exchanged glances, hands resting near hidden holsters, the air thick with suspicion. But Marcus knelt to the boy's level, his scarred knuckles brushing dust from Caleb's shoulder. In that moment, something stirred in him, an echo of his own youth, orphaned by war, saved by a stranger's word. This wasn't just a detour, it was a call, pulling at the threads of an old promise to stand for the vulnerable. The convoy halted fully now, boots crunching on parched earth as riders dismounted. The sun dipped lower, painting the horizon in blood-red hues, and the distant howl of coyotes underscored the tension. Marcus studied the sign, his calloused fingers tracing the fresh welds where it had been manipulated. "Sabotage," he muttered, his jaw tightening. Years ago, in the dim glow of a VA ward, his comrade Elias had gripped his hand and vowed, "If I go first, Marcus, you keep the road clear for the ones who follow. No one gets left to the wolves." Elias hadn't made it, but Marcus had carried that oath like a tattoo on his soul, founding the Iron Vow crew to honor it, bikers who rode not for chaos, but for quiet justice, mending what the world broke. Caleb watched as the riders spread out, scouting the false path. One, a burly veteran named Tyler, with a prosthetic arm gleaming under his sleeve, nodded approvingly at the boy. "Smart eyes, kid. Saved our hides before we even knew." The group murmured agreement, a bond forming in the shared glance of men who'd stared down worse than bent metal. Marcus straightened, placing a heavy hand on Caleb's shoulder. "You ride with us to the next town, safer that way." It was more than an offer. It was the spark of something unbreakable, a promise exchanged in the fading light that would bind a lone boy to a brotherhood, altering the course of shadowed roads ahead. As they remounted, engines firing back to life with a symphony of power, the convoy veered true east, leaving the tampered sign as a warning in the dust. Caleb climbed onto the back of Marcus's bike, clutching the rider's jacket, the leather warm against his chest. The wind whipped through his hair as they accelerated, the desert blurring into streaks of gold and shadow. But Marcus's mind raced ahead. Who had set the trap? Whispers of corruption in the county, sheriffs on the take, turning blind eyes to ambushes for profit. This ride, meant to escort a convoy of aid supplies to a remote reservation, had just become a reckoning. The boy's alert wasn't chance. It was fate's hand, pulling Marcus back into the fray he'd tried to leave behind. Night fell swiftly, stars piercing the velvet sky like distant promises. The bikes hummed onward, headlights cutting through the dark, while Caleb's small voice rose above the noise. "My dad always said the road tells the truth if you listen." Marcus glanced back, a faint smile cracking his weathered face. "Then we'll listen, son, all the way." In that vow, unspoken yet ironclad, the seeds of redemption took root, for a man haunted by ghosts and a boy adrift in a world of lies. The ambush averted was only the beginning. Greater shadows loomed, testing the limits of loyalty and the weight of words given in the heat of the moment. The convoy pressed on, the boy's discovery rippling through the ranks like a shared heartbeat. Marcus felt the old fire stir, the one that had driven him through sandstorms and salvos, now channeled into protecting this unexpected ally. Caleb, for his part, sensed a shift, a family not of blood, but of the road, where honor outshone the stars. As the miles unfolded, the desert whispered secrets of trials to come, where justice would demand more than a sharp eye. It would require the soul's unyielding stand. The engines thrummed like a living pulse under the starlit canopy, headlights carving silver paths through the inky void of the desert night. Caleb clung tighter to Marcus's waist, the vibration of the Harley seeping into his bones, a rhythm that drowned out the day's fears but amplified the unknowns ahead. The wind carried the sharp tang of creosote bushes and cooling earth, whipping past them in gusts that tugged at the boy's jacket. Behind, the convoy stretched like a serpent of light and shadow. 50 riders, holding formation with the precision of men who'd once synced breaths in the chaos of combat. Marcus's mind, however, wasn't on the road's hum. It replayed the boy's warning, the twisted sign a stark reminder that the desert's neutrality was a lie, poisoned by hands unseen. They'd covered 10 miles when the first flicker of trouble appeared, a distant glow on the horizon. Not the warm amber of a roadside diner, but the harsh white of floodlights piercing the dark. Marcus eased back on the throttle, signaling the pack to slow. "Eyes sharp!" he growled into the comms mic clipped to his helmet, his voice a low rumble that cut through the static. The riders responded with subtle nods, their bikes idling to whispers as the convoy bunched up at a weathered pullout, gravel crunching under tires, worn from endless patrols. Caleb lifted his head, peering over Marcus's shoulder, the boy's breath quickening at the sight. "That's not the town," he whispered, his small hands fisting the leather. Should be lights from the diner by now. Neon sign, pancakes after midnight. Marcus dismounted first, his boots hitting the ground with a solid thud that echoed his resolve. He helped Caleb down, the boy's legs shaky from the ride, and scanned the landscape. The flats stretched barren, dotted with jagged outcrops that could hide 1,000 sins. The glow emanated from what looked like a makeshift checkpoint, barriers of sawhorses and flickering beacons blocking the true path to Willow Creek. Whispers from the riders filtered through the cooling air. Rumors of county enforcers shaking down travelers, diverting routes for tolls that lined pockets fat with graft. Tyler, the one-armed vet, rolled up beside them, his prosthetic glinting under the moonlight as he killed his engine. "Looks like a welcome party we didn't RSVP for," he said, his tone laced with the dry humor of a man who'd laughed off shrapnel. "Kid's got the nose for it. What's the play, boss?" The group formed a loose circle, faces illuminated by the soft blue of phone screens checking maps, old-school paper ones too, folded and creased from years of use. Marcus's gaze settled on Caleb, who stood a little straighter now, the fear in his eyes hardening into something fiercer, like embers catching wind. The boy had lost his mom to a quiet fade in a sterile room, his dad to the pull of the horizon, leaving him to navigate alone. But tonight, that solitude cracked open. "You know these roads better than any GPS," Marcus said, kneeling again to meet the child's level, his voice steady as an anchor. "Tell us what you see." Caleb pointed toward the lights, his finger tracing an invisible line. "That's the old quarry turnoff. They use it for stuff. Hauling things that ain't legal. If we go through, they'll stop us, ask for papers, maybe worse. My dad detoured there once, came back with bruises he didn't explain." A murmur rippled through the riders, hands shifting to rest on handlebars or pockets, not in threat, but readiness. Marcus rose, his silhouette tall against the starry expanse, the weight of Elias's promise pressing like a phantom hand on his shoulder. Back in that hospital, amid the beep of monitors and the scent of antiseptic, Elias had extracted the vow with eyes fever-bright. "The roads, Marcus, they're veins of the land. Keep 'em pure, or the poison spreads." The iron vow had been born from that, a creed etched in ink and iron, binding ex-soldiers, mechanics, wanderers into a family that mended fractures the law ignored. This detour, this glow, it reeked of the corruption Elias had railed against, sheriffs turning badges to shields for smugglers, leaving the vulnerable to the wolves. "We circle wide," Marcus decided, his words cutting the night like a blade. "Scout the ridge, find the real way in, no charging blind." The riders nodded, mounting up with the quiet efficiency of a unit long tested. Tyler clapped Caleb on the back gently. "Ride with me this stretch, kid. Got a spare helmet that won't swallow you whole." Caleb hesitated, glancing at Marcus, who gave a nod of approval. It was a small trust, but in the Brotherhood's code, small trusts built empires of loyalty. As Caleb climbed onto Tyler's bike, the engine's growl welcomed him, a mechanical heartbeat syncing with his own. They veered off the asphalt onto a dirt track, the convoy navigating by the faint beam of moonlight and the boys recalled landmarks. A lone Joshua tree twisted like a sentinel. A dry wash that snaked through boulders. The air grew cooler, carrying the faint, acrid bite of distant exhaust from the false checkpoint. Marcus led the flank, his thoughts churning. Who'd tampered with the sign? The same shadows behind this blockade, no doubt. Rivals eyeing the aid convoy's route, supplies meant for the reservation's clinic, ripe for hijack. He'd heard the talk in dusty bars, a ring of locals, backed by a crooked deputy, preying on the isolated. But proof was a ghost, slipping through fingers like sand. Halfway around the ridge, the path narrowed, forcing single file. Caleb, from his perch behind Tyler, spotted it first. A glint of metal half buried in the scrub, wires snaking toward the trail. "Stop!" he yelled, voice piercing the din. Tyler braked hard, the convoy halting in a cascade of dust. Marcus swung off, approaching cautiously, his flashlight beam revealing the crude device, a tripwire linked to a rockfall trap, positioned to bury intruders under tons of shale. Another one, he muttered, disarming it with steady hands, the snip of cutters echoing like a vow renewed. The riders gathered, faces grim in the flash's glow. This wasn't random. It was a web spun to ensnare the unwary. As they cleared the hazard and pressed on, the first lights of Willow Creek winked into view, genuine, welcoming, the neon diner sign buzzing like a beacon of normalcy. But the night's revelations lingered, attention coiling tighter. Caleb rode in silence now, the weight of his alerts settling like a mantle. Marcus glanced back through the mirrors, seeing the boy silhouetted against the stars, a spark of purpose igniting in one so young. The ambush point averted was Mercy's first strike, but the true battle brewed in the town's underbelly where justice demanded more than evasion. It called for confrontation, rooted in the unyielding honor of promises kept. Dawn crept in as they rolled into the diner's lot, engines silencing to the chirp of waking birds. The riders dismounted, stretching limbs stiff from vigilance, while Caleb slid down, eyes wide at the steaming coffee pots and the sizzle of bacon from within. Marcus placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, the gesture heavy with unspoken alliance. "You didn't just save us tonight, son. You reminded us why we ride." Lee, in the quiet camaraderie of the group, shared glances, a nod from Tyler, the clink of keys. The bonds of chosen family deepened, forging a path toward reckoning. The desert's secrets were unraveling, and with each mile the call to stand grew louder, echoing the oaths that bound them all. The steam from the diner's coffee pots curled like ghosts in the early morning chill, mingling with the rich aroma of frying eggs and the faint metallic tang of cooling engines. Willow Creek's lone eatery, a squat building with faded red siding and a sign that flickered, open 24/7 in sputtering neon, stood as a fragile oasis amid the endless flats. Marcus Hale pushed through the glass door, the bell jingling softly above him, his boots leaving dusty prints on the linoleum floor. Caleb trailed close, the boy's eyes darting from the chrome stools to the jukebox humming a forgotten country tune, everything feeling larger and more alive than the quiet isolation of his usual days. Inside, the air was thick with the warmth of bodies and the low murmur of truckers nursing mugs at the counter. The riders filtered in behind, their leather jackets creaking as they claimed a corner booth, a sea of weathered faces and calloused hands. Tyler slid in first, his prosthetic arm resting on the table with a soft clunk, drawing a curious glance from the waitress. A sturdy woman named Lena, her apron stained from years of spills. Marcus guided Caleb to a seat, the vinyl cushions sighing under their weight. "Pancakes on me, kid," he said, his voice a low anchor in the din. "You earned 'em." Caleb nodded, a shy smile breaking through the exhaustion etched on his face, but his fingers twisted the edge of his napkin, the night's close calls replaying like shadows on the walls. As plates arrived, stacks of golden pancakes dripping syrup, strips of bacon crisp and savory, the conversation turned guarded, voices dropping to whispers beneath the clatter of silverware. Marcus leaned in, his grey eyes scanning the room, ever the sentinel. "That checkpoint back there, it's no accident. Same hands behind the sign, I'd wager." Tyler nodded, forking a bite with deliberate slowness. "Heard chatter on the CB before we linked up. Reservation aid's the target. Supplies vanish, folks suffer, and the county looks the other way. Deputy Harlan's name keeps popping up. Clean badge, dirty deals." The words hung heavy, laced with the bitterness of men who'd seen systems fail the innocent, from war zones to home soil. Caleb listened, his small frame tense between the giants, absorbing fragments like a sponge. He'd overheard his dad muttering about Harlan once, late at night over a flickering TV, the deputy's cruiser idling too long outside the local store. "He takes what ain't his dad had said, voice rough with fatigue. Now, sitting here, Caleb felt the pull of that truth, a thread connecting his warnings to something larger, a web of shadows threatening the very roads that defined his world. He pushed his plate aside, appetite fading. "The quarry. They use it for more than hauling. Kids in town say it's where things go missing. Trucks come at night. Lights off." The booth fell silent, the jukebox's twang the only sound for a beat. Marcus's jaw tightened, the lines around his mouth deepening like cracks in parched earth. Elias's promise echoed in his mind, sharper now: protect the roads, guard the lost. The Iron Vow crew had formed around that oath, a patchwork of souls scarred by abandonment, veterans like Tyler, who'd lost his arm to an IED and his faith to bureaucracy. Wanderers like Lena's husband, a mechanic who'd joined after pulling Marcus from a ditch years back. They weren't outlaws, they were menders riding to deliver aid, to stand where badges faltered. But this corruption, festering in Willow Creek's veins, tested that creed like never before. Outside, the sun climbed higher, bathing the parking lot in a golden haze that turned the bikes into sculptures of gleaming resolve. A few riders lingered by their machines, wiping down chrome with oil-stained rags, the scent of lubricant cutting through the morning dew. One, a lanky figure named Nathan, with tattoos snaking up his arms like vines, fiddled with a loose chain, his eyes flicking toward the horizon. That's when the rumble started. Not the welcoming growl of allies, but a deeper, ominous drone approaching from the east. Dust clouds billowed, heralding a line of black SUVs, their tinted windows reflecting the dawn like obsidian mirrors. Marcus rose smoothly, signaling the others with a subtle tilt of his head. The diner emptied in a controlled wave, riders drifting to their bikes without haste, hands casual but ready. Caleb stuck to Marcus's side, heart pounding as the vehicles pulled into the lot, blocking the exit like a noose tightening. The lead door swung open, and out stepped Deputy Harlan, a stocky man in a crisp uniform, his badge catching the light, face set in a mask of authority that didn't reach his eyes. Flanked by two deputies and a pair of plainclothes types with the hard stares of hired muscle, he sauntered forward, boots crunching gravel. "Morning, Hale," Harlan drawled, his voice smooth as oiled leather but undercut with a sneer. "Heard you boys took a scenic route last night. Signs. Must have been confusing." The implication landed like a stone in still water, ripples of tension spreading through the group. Marcus met his gaze evenly, the air between them charged, thick with unspoken accusations. "Roads are clear enough if you know where to look," Marcus replied, his tone measured, the weight of restraint in every syllable. Caleb shrank back, but Marcus's hand on his shoulder steadied him, a silent vow. "You're with us now." Harlan's eyes slid to the boy, narrowing. "And who's the tag-along? Lost pup?" The words dripped condescension, but Caleb straightened, the fire from the night's alerts flickering back. "I know the signs were wrong, and the traps. You can't just—" Marcus squeezed gently, cutting him off, but the damage was done. Harlan's smile thinned, a predator sensing weakness. Curious kid. Maybe he saw things he shouldn't. "We've got reports of tampering, folks causing trouble on county property." The deputies shifted, hands near belts, the morning light casting long shadows that danced like threats. The standoff stretched, the desert wind whispering through the lot, carrying the faint scent of sage and suspicion. Tyler edged closer on his bike, engine idling low, a subtle barrier. The crew held formation, not aggressive but unyielding, their presence a testament to loyalty forged in silence. Marcus stepped forward, voice low and firm. "We're just passing through, Harlan, delivering what's owed to the reservation. No trouble unless it's brought." It was a line drawn in the dust, echoing Elias's creed. Integrity over impulse, truth over force. Harlan chuckled, but it rang hollow, his eyes flicking to the aid crates strapped to the bikes. Medical supplies, food, hope wrapped in canvas. Ode, that's rich. Stick to your lanes or the road gets bumpy. He turned, signaling his men to mount up, the SUVs revving with a throaty menace before peeling out, leaving a wake of swirling grit. The riders exhaled collectively, the tension uncoiling like a spring, but Marcus's expression remained etched with resolve. This was no idle warning. It was the corruption baring teeth, probing for cracks. As the convoy reformed, Caleb climbed back onto Marcus's bike, the leather seat still warm from the sun. "They're watching us," the boy said softly, voice steady despite the fear. Marcus nodded, firing the engine to life, its roar a defiant symphony. "Let 'em, we've got eyes too." They pulled out, the diner shrinking in the mirrors, Willow Creek's facade of normalcy cracking under the weight of hidden agendas. The ride ahead promised more than miles. It demanded the unbreaking spine of honor, where a boy's sharp notice and a man's old oath would clash against the dark heart of the land. The desert stretched onward, secrets buried in its folds, waiting for the light of justice to unearth them. The sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked ribbon of Route 47, turning the asphalt into a shimmering mirage that distorted the horizon like a fever dream. Marcus Hale led the convoy with a steady throttle, the Harley's engine a constant growl that resonated through his chest, sinking with the pulse of resolve hardening in his veins. Caleb rode behind him, the boy's arms wrapped firmly around Marcus's midsection, the wind tousling his hair into wild spikes. The desert air rushed past, carrying the dry, earthy scent of sun-baked sand and the faint, bitter edge of distant wildfires long extinguished. Behind them, the Iron Vow riders maintained their vigilant formation, bikes humming in harmony, a rolling testament to the brotherhood that had pulled Marcus from the abyss of his post-war solitude. They'd left Willow Creek's diner in their dust, the encounter with Deputy Harlan lingering like a bad aftertaste, his smug parting words echoing in Marcus's mind, a veiled threat wrapped in the guise of law. The aid crates strapped to the bikes jostled with each bump, their contents a lifeline for the reservation ahead. Bandages, antibiotics, canned goods that could mean the difference between endurance and despair for families clinging to the margins. Elias's promise burned brighter now, a beacon against the encroaching shadows of graft. Marcus had seen corruption before, in the form of officers who looked the other way while villages crumbled, but here on home soil it felt personal, a betrayal of the very oaths meant to protect. As the miles blurred, Caleb shifted, his voice cutting through the roar like a clear bell. "That deputy, he knows about the quarry. My dad said Harlan's crew runs trucks through there at night, loading up stuff from the borders. Never comes back the same." The boy's words carried the weight of overheard fragments, pieced together from late-night whispers and the tense silences that followed his father's long absences. Marcus glanced back through the rearview, catching the determination in Caleb's eyes, a mirror to his own youthful fire before loss had tempered it into steel. "Sounds like more than rumors," Marcus replied, his tone grave but encouraging. "You've got a good ear, kid. Keep it open. We might need it." The convoy crested a final rise, and the reservation unfolded below. A patchwork of modest homes clustered around a central community center, ringed by scrubland that stretched to the jagged mountains. Dust devils danced in the heat, swirling like restless spirits, while the air hummed with the distant calls of ravens wheeling overhead. The riders eased into the gravel lot, fronting the center, engines fading to silence as they dismounted, the sudden quiet amplifying the crunch of boots and the soft sighs of relief. Elders and families emerged from doorways, their faces lined with the quiet dignity of survivors, eyes lighting with cautious hope at the sight of the crates. Tyler was the first to unload, his prosthetic arm extending with mechanical precision as he hefted a box toward a waiting group led by an elder named Samuel, a man whose silver braids framed a face etched with stories of resilience. "Brought what we could," Tyler said, his voice warm against the cool shade of the awning. "From folks who remember the old debts." Samuel nodded, his grip firm on the crate, but his expression clouded as he peered inside. "Grateful, brothers, but we've been short before. Supplies vanish between here and the depots. Last shipment, half gone, like ghosts took it." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication, and Marcus felt the coil of anger tighten in his gut. Harlan's shadow loomed larger, the deputy's tolls bleeding the land dry. Caleb lingered by Marcus's bike, watching the exchange, his small frame taut with the instinct that had saved them once already. As the riders distributed the goods, stacking shelves in the clinic with careful hands, the scent of fresh bandages mingling with the herbal tang of traditional remedies, a young woman approached, her name Elena, a nurse with weary eyes and a stethoscope draped around her neck. She pulled Marcus aside, voice low amid the bustle. "We've lost patients waiting for meds that never arrive. Whispers say it's the quarry route. Trucks diverted, drivers paid off. If you know the roads." She trailed off, hope flickering like a candle in wind. Marcus's mind raced, the pieces aligning, the tampered sign, the false checkpoint, the traps, all threads in a noose around the vulnerable. Elias's vow pulsed stronger, demanding action beyond delivery. He turned to Caleb, who had edged closer, ears attuned. "What do you know about the quarry path, son? Any shortcuts?" The boy thought, brow furrowing, then pointed toward a faint trail snaking from the reservation's edge. "Dad used it once, avoids the main drag, but it's rough, full of washes, and lights at night, moving wrong." It was enough, a spark in the dry tinder of their suspicions. As the sun dipped toward afternoon, casting elongated shadows across the lot, the riders gathered for a hushed council under the center's overhang. Nathan, the tattooed mechanic, sketched a rough map on a napkin, his inked fingers smudging the edges. "We scout tonight. Quiet ride. No lights. If it's Harlan's game, we get proof, photos, tags, something to tip the scales." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group, the air thick with the scent of cooling metal and shared purpose. Tyler clapped Caleb on the shoulder. "You in, Sharp Eyes? Ride scout with us." The boy hesitated, glancing at Marcus, who nodded solemnly. In that moment the bond solidified, not blood, but forged in the fire of necessity, a chosen family expanding to shield the overlooked. Dusk painted the sky in bruised purples as they prepared, bikes tuned to stealth with muffled exhausts, the reservation's lights winking farewell. Marcus mounted up, Caleb settling behind him once more, the leather creaking like a promise sealed. The engine's low purr vibrated through them, a heartbeat against the encroaching night. They slipped onto the trail, a single-file shadow weaving through the washes, the air growing cooler, laced with the musty breath of hidden crevices. Moonlight filtered through clouds, illuminating glimpses of the quarry's rim, a yawning scar in the earth, where faint echoes suggested activity below. Halfway in, Caleb tensed, pointing to a flicker in the distance. Headlights weaving erratically, not the steady beam of legitimate haulers, but the erratic dance of evasion. "There! Trucks, like I said." Marcus signaled a halt, the convoy idling to whispers as they crested a ridge. Below, in the quarry's bowl, shadows moved. Crates unloaded under portable lamps, figures in dark jackets exchanging whispers and envelopes. One truck bore markings that matched county surplus, a damning detail caught in Nathan's camera flash, muted and quick. But as they watched, A figure broke from the group, scanning the rim with a flashlight sweep. Harlan's voice carried faintly on the wind, barking orders, his silhouette unmistakable. The realization hit Marcus like a gut punch. This wasn't just theft, it was systemic rot, starving the reservation to fatten coffers. Elias's words resurfaced, guard the lost, no matter the cost. Proof in hand, they retreated silently, the trail's rugged embrace hiding their withdrawal. Back at the reservation, under the glow of a single bulb, the riders pored over the images, faces grim with the weight of truth. Caleb stood tall among them, his alert the linchpin that had unveiled the veil. "We tell someone," he said, voice steady. "Make it right." Marcus placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, the gesture heavy with paternal echo. "We will, son. But right means standing firm, not striking blind." The night deepened, stars emerging like witnesses to their pact, the Iron Vow's creed expanding to encompass this young guardian of truths. The confrontation loomed, not with fists, but with the unyielding light of exposure, where honor would demand they ride into the heart of the lie. If this tale of quiet courage and unbreakable bonds has stirred something in you, hit that like button below. It helps these stories reach more roads and more hearts. Your support keeps the promise alive. The moon hung like a silver medallion over the reservation's clustered homes, its pale light filtering through the cottonwood leaves that rustled softly in the night breeze. Inside the community center, the air was thick with the scent of cooling coffee and the faint, herbal sharpness of sage smoldering in a clay bowl on the table, a ritual to clear the mind before hard choices. Marcus Hale sat at the head of the scarred wooden table, the proof, photos spread out before the Iron Vow riders like cards in a high-stakes game. The images captured it all, the quarry's shadowed depths, crates stamped with county seals being shifted under Harlan's watchful eye, envelopes changing hands in the lamplight. Caleb stood beside him, the boy's small hand resting on the table's edge, his face illuminated by the single bulb overhead, eyes reflecting a mix of triumph and trepidation. Tyler leaned forward, his prosthetic arm whirring faintly as he tapped a photo of the deputy. "That's our noose. Harlan's running the show, bleeding the aid dry before it reaches here, but exposing him, it's a spark that could light the whole powder keg." The other riders nodded, their faces a mosaic of resolve etched by firelight and fatigue. Nathan tracing the tattoo of a coiled serpent on his forearm, a symbol of vigilance he'd inked after his own brush with betrayal in the service. The room hummed with the low vibration of unspoken oaths, the weight of Elias's promise binding them tighter than any chain. Marcus had carried that vow across deserts and decades, turning it into the crew's creed: protect the veins of the land, shield the lost from the poison. Now, with Caleb's sharp notice as the key, that creed faced its sternest test. Elena, the nurse, paced near the window, her stethoscope swaying like a pendulum. "We've buried too many because of delays like this. If you riders can get word to the right ears, state investigators maybe, it could end the cycle." Her voice cracked on the edge of desperation, the lines around her eyes deepening in the dim glow. Caleb shifted, his sneakers scuffing the worn floorboards, the night scout replaying in his mind. The erratic truck lights, the furtive figures, the way Harlan's bark had cut through the dark like a blade. He'd felt alive then, part of something bigger than his solitary peddling along empty roads, a boy adrift since his mum's quiet passing and his dad's endless horizons. Marcus caught his gaze, offering a nod that spoke volumes. "You're not alone in this." "We move at first light," Marcus decided, his voice a steady rumble that quelled the room's tension. "Head to the county seat, deliver the evidence clean. No confrontations on our terms. Let the law's own weight crush the rot." But even as he spoke, doubt flickered. Harlan's reach was long, his allies embedded like thorns in the system's flesh. The deputy wouldn't fade quietly. He'd fight dirty, turning the roads into battlegrounds. The riders dispersed to their bikes outside, checking straps and fueling tanks under the stars, the metallic tang of gasoline mingling with the night's cooling earth. Caleb lingered, helping Marcus fold the photos into a waterproof pouch, his fingers nimble despite the chill. "What if they don't believe us?" the boy asked, voice small but threaded with steel. Marcus knelt, the creak of his leather jacket echoing softly. "Truth has a way of cutting through lies, son, like you did with that sign. We ride for it. Together." Dawn broke with a blush of pink across the eastern sky, the reservation stirring to life as roosters crowed and wood smoke curled from chimneys. The convoy assembled in the gravel lot, engines coughing to life in a chorus that vibrated through the ground, scattering dust like confetti. Caleb climbed onto Marcus's Harley once more, the familiar warmth of the seat grounding him as the group pulled out, weaving through the community's edge toward the open road. The air freshened with the promise of morning, carrying hints of wildflowers crushed under tires, but the horizon loomed heavy with uncertainty. They stuck to back trails at first, Caleb's recalled shortcuts avoiding the main drags where Harlan's eyes might lurk, narrow paths flanked by mesquite thickets, the bikes bumping over ruts that tested their balance. 10 miles in, the first snag hit, a fallen boulder blocking the trail, its surface scarred with fresh pry marks, as if shoved deliberately into place. Marcus signaled a halt, dismounting with the fluid grace of experience, his boots sinking into the soft sand. "Not natural," he muttered, circling the obstruction, the sun's early rays glinting off quartz veins in the rock. Tyler joined him, heaving with his good arm, while Nathan wedged a crowbar, muscles straining under tattooed skin. Caleb watched from the bike, heart quickening. This was no accident, another thread in the web. As they rolled the boulder aside, a glint caught his eye. A scrap of fabric snagged on a thorn bush nearby, dark and uniform-like, bearing the faint embroidery of a sheriff's patch. "Look!" he called, holding it up, the evidence fluttering like a flag of warning. The crew pressed on, but the delay cost them. By mid-morning, the distant wail of sirens pierced the air, growing louder as black and whites crested a distant ridge. Harlan's response, swift, unyielding. Marcus gunned the throttle, the convoy surging forward in a tight pack, dust plumes rising like signals in the heat. The chase unfolded in cinematic fury, bikes leaning into curves, engines roaring defiance against the pursuing cruiser's flashing lights. Caleb clung tight, the wind stinging his eyes, the scent of hot rubber and adrenaline sharp in his nostrils. "They're gaining!" he shouted over the din, but Marcus's voice cut back steady. "Hold on, we know these turns." They dove into a canyon wash, the walls rising sheer and red, narrowing the path to a gauntlet that the heavier cars couldn't match. The lead cruiser fishtailed, gravel spraying as it tried to follow, but the bikes threaded the needle, emerging onto a straightaway slick with recent rain. Marcus veered toward a hidden pullout, an old miner's overlook shrouded by boulders, signaling the pack to scatter and conceal. Engines cut, the riders hunkered down, breaths ragged in the sudden silence, broken only by the fading Doppler of sirens. Peering from cover, Caleb saw the cruisers slow, deputies scanning futilely before turning back, frustration evident in their gestures. It was a narrow escape, hearts pounding like war drums, but the fire of purpose burned hotter. "They're scared," Tyler whispered, wiping sweat from his brow. "Means we're close." As the sun climbed to noon, baking the canyon walls into furnaces, the convoy reformed and pushed toward the county seat, a dusty town named Redstone, its courthouse a squat brick sentinel amid strip malls and faded billboards. They arrived under the cover of lengthening shadows, parking in a lot behind a nondescript motel, the air humming with the buzz of cicadas. Marcus led the way inside, Caleb at his side, the pouch of photos clutched like a talisman. The front desk clerk, A wiry man with a mustache like steel wool directed them to a state auditor's office across the street, his eyes widening at the sight of the leather-clad group but saying nothing. Inside the office, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile pallor on file cabinets and stacks of reports. The auditor, a bespectacled woman named Grace with a no-nonsense bun, listened as Marcus laid it out, the tampered signs, the traps, the quarry-proof. His voice measured, laced with the moral gravity of a man honoring ghosts. Caleb added details, his young voice steady, recounting the sign's twist and the night's flickers, the room growing still as the images sealed the tale. Grace's expression shifted from skepticism to steel, her fingers drumming the desk. This could topple a house of cards. I'll escalate to the feds, quietly, but Harlan's got friends. Watch your backs. They stepped out into the cooling evening, the sky streaked with the day's dying embers, a profound quiet settling over the group. The delivery was made, the spark ignited, but the road back promised thorns, retaliation from a cornered snake. Marcus turned to Caleb, ruffling the boy's hair with a scarred hand. You started this, son, with one pair of eyes on a wrong arrow. In that touch, the threads of redemption wove tighter. A veteran's haunted soul, finding purpose in protection, a boy's isolation yielding to belonging. The iron vow rode on. Not just machines, but bearers of justice, their loyalty a shield against the gathering storm. The desert whispered of trials yet to unfold, where honor's quiet stand would echo longest. The twilight deepened over Redstone's outskirts, the sky bleeding into a bruised indigo that mirrored the tension coiling in Marcus Hale's chest. The motel's parking lot, a cracked expanse of asphalt hemmed by sagging chain link and the skeletal silhouettes of mesquite trees, hummed with the low idles of the Iron Vow bikes. The air carried the sharp bite of exhaust mingled with the earthy dampness rising from an irrigation ditch nearby, a rare moisture in the desert's unrelenting thirst. Marcus stood by his Harley, arms crossed over his leather vest, the pouch of photos now safely handed off, but its absence leaving him hollow, as if Elias's promise had been traded for a fragile hope. Caleb sat on the curb beside him, kicking at loose pebbles, the boy's face smudged with road dust and resolve, his small frame a stark contrast to the towering riders milling about. Tyler approached first, his prosthetic arm catching the faint glow from the motel's neon sign, a flickering vacancy that buzzed like an uneasy warning. Grace seemed solid, said she'd loop in the feds by morning. But Harlan's not the type to wait for warrants. We hole up here tonight, eyes open. His voice was a gravelly murmur, tempered by years of anticipating ambushes in foreign sands, now transposed to this home front betrayal. Nathan nodded from where he leaned against his bike, wiping a chamois over the chrome with methodical strokes, the cloth whispering against metal. His tattoos seemed to shift in the dim light, serpents coiling as if sensing the storm. The crew had claimed rooms on the second floor, a row of identical doors peeling paint like old wounds, but sleep was a distant luxury. Sentries rotated every hour, the scent of stale coffee from a shared thermos cutting through the night's chill. Caleb glanced up at Marcus, his eyes wide but steady, the weight of the day's revelations settling on him like an ill-fitting jacket. They won't let it go, will they? The deputy, Harlan. He looked at me like I was next. The words tumbled out, laced with the raw edge of a child piecing together the world's sharper angles. Marcus knelt, the gravel biting into his knees, and met the boy's gaze level. The lines on his face, carved by loss and long rides, softened just a fraction. Some men build walls from their greed, son, but we've got something stronger, truth and the folks who stand by it. It was more than reassurance. It echoed the hospital vow to Elias, the one that had pulled Marcus from aimless drifting into this brotherhood of quiet guardians. Caleb had become part of that now, his alert on the twisted sign, the catalyst that bound him to their fold. a chosen son in a family forged from scars. As the moon climbed higher, silvering the lot and turning the bikes into ghostly sentinels, the first ripple of trouble stirred. A low rumble echoed from the east, not the familiar thunder of Harleys, but the deeper growl of modified pickups, tires chewing gravel like predators closing in. Marcus straightened, hand signaling the crew to positions, some melting into shadows by the motel's side, others mounting up with engines cold to avoid the giveaway roar. Caleb scrambled to his feet, heart hammering, the air thickening with the acrid tang of impending dust. Headlights pierced the dark, 3 vehicles barreling into the lot without slowing, their beams sweeping like searchlights, illuminating the tension in stark relief. The lead truck skidded to a halt, doors slamming as 4 figures emerged, Harlan at the fore, his uniform rumpled under a leather jacket, flanked by deputies whose badges glinted mockingly. They weren't in cruisers this time. These were unmarked rigs, the kind used for off-book errands, their beds loaded with coiled ropes and shadowed tools that hinted at rougher intentions. "Hell!" Harlan barked, his voice slicing the night, laced with the false bravado of a cornered man. "Word travels fast. Auditor's office? Cute play. But roads like these, they remember who pays the tolls." He stepped forward, boots crunching, eyes locking on Caleb with a predatory gleam that made the boy edge behind Marcus. The deputies fanned out, hands hovering near holsters, the air electric with the standoff's fragile balance. Marcus didn't flinch, his stance a wall of unyielding calm, the wind tugging at his beard like an old comrade urging restraint. "Tolls paid in trust, Harlan. Yours ran out when you started starving folks for scraps." The words landed heavy, drawing murmurs from the shadows where Tyler and Nathan waited, their presence a silent encirclement. The crew held back, honoring the vow's core. No needless blood, only the moral strike that exposed rot. But Harlan laughed, a hollow bark that echoed off the motel walls, pulling a pistol from his waistband with casual menace. "Trust? From a pack of road rats? Kid here's seen too much. Quarry lights, twisted signs. Loose ends get tied." His gaze bored into Caleb, the threat coiling like smoke, but the boy didn't cower. Instead, he stepped forward, voice piping clear. "I saw everything. The trucks, the envelopes. It ends tonight." The deputy's face twisted, fury cracking his facade, and he lunged, not at Marcus, but toward the boy, pistol rising. Time fractured in that instant, the glint of moonlight on steel, the sharp intake of breaths, the desert's hush broken by the scuffle of boots. Marcus moved like a shadow unleashed, intercepting with a shoulder that sent Harlan sprawling into the gravel, the gun skittering across the lot. The deputies surged, but the iron vow closed ranks. Tyler tackling one with a sweep of his good arm, Nathan disarming another with a precise twist, honed from garage brawls. Fists flew in controlled bursts, grunts and thuds punctuating the night, the scent of sweat and blood faint but metallic. Caleb backed against a bike, eyes wide, but pride flickered there. His words had drawn the line, forcing the confrontation into the open. Harlan scrambled up, face smeared with dirt, spitting curses as he retrieved his weapon. "You think photos stop this? The county's mine, feds'll bury it like the rest." But his bluster faltered under the rider's unbreaking circle, flashlights from phones pinning him like stage lights, Nathan's camera clicking evidence anew. Sirens wailed in the distance, drawn by the motel's frantic call, Grace's escalation rippling faster than expected. Harlan's men hesitated, the tide turning as blue lights crested the horizon, real badges closing in. The deputy backed toward his truck, eyes wild, the fight draining from him like sand through fingers. "This ain't over, Hale. Roads have long memories." The vehicles peeled out in a spray of gravel, taillights fading into the dark as state troopers arrived, their cruisers flooding the lot with authoritative beams. Marcus stood firm, Caleb at his side, the boy's hand finding his in the chaos. a small anchor amid the unfolding justice. Statements were given under the harsh glare of headlights, the photos digital copies sealing Harlan's fate, the web of corruption unraveling thread by thread. As the troopers led away the captured deputies, the air lightened, carrying the faint, cleansing scent of dawn's approach. Tyler clapped Marcus on the back, his grin weary but genuine. Kid's got the makings of a rider, sharp as that sign he spotted. In the motel's quiet aftermath, as the crew gathered under the awning, sharing water from canteens that tasted of victory, Marcus looked to Caleb. The boy, exhausted but unbroken, met his eyes with a nod that spoke of bonds sealed in fire. Elias's promise had evolved, encompassing not just roads, but the souls who traversed them, a redemption woven from loyalty's quiet threads. The desert night whispered of closure nearing, but the true legacy lay in the stand they'd taken, honor's echo resounding across the miles. Yet shadows lingered, Harlan's parting threat a final coil, hinting at one last trial before the light fully broke. The first rays of dawn sliced through the motel's threadbare curtains, painting the parking lot in strokes of pale gold that chased away the night's lingering chill. Marcus Hale leaned against the Harley's fender, the metal still warm from the engine's earlier fury, its scent of oil and exhaust a familiar balm against the adrenaline's ebb. Caleb sat nearby on an overturned crate, nursing a paper cup of vending machine coffee too bitter for his taste, but he sipped it anyway, mimicking the rider's stoic ritual. The state troopers had cleared out an hour ago, hauling the captured deputies in cuffs that glinted like false promises, their cruiser's taillights swallowed by the horizon. Harlan had slipped the net, his truck vanishing into the pre-dawn haze, but the photos, fresh ones from Nathan's camera, painted a portrait of guilt no amount of evasion could erase. The Iron Vow crew gathered loosely around a cluster of bikes, faces shadowed by fatigue, but lit with the quiet satisfaction of a stand well made. Tyler flexed his prosthetic fingers, the mechanism whirring softly, while Nathan stowed his camera in a saddlebag, its lens cap snapping shut like a period on the night's chaos. The air hummed with the low buzz of cicadas awakening, carrying the faint mineral tang of dew-kissed sage from the surrounding scrub. Marcus's gaze drifted to Caleb, the boy who had upended their ride with a single sharp-eyed warning, a twisted sign that unraveled a conspiracy's threads. In the boy's unblinking stare, Marcus saw echoes of his own lost youth, before war's thunder had scarred him, before Elias's fevered grip had forged the vow that defined him. Guard the lost, keep the roads pure. "We ride back to the reservation," Marcus said, his voice a gravel anchor cutting through the morning's hush. "See the delivery through. Make sure the supplies stick this time." Nods rippled through the group, the unspoken pact of chosen family binding them tighter than blood. Caleb stood, brushing dust from his jeans, the motion small but resolute. "And Harlan?" He said it wasn't over. The question hung, laced with the boy's newfound steel, forged in the motel's scuffle, where he'd faced down the deputy's glare without flinching. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder, the leather of his glove creaking softly. "Men like him chase shadows, till the light catches them. We've lit the way." They mounted up as the sun crested fully, engines roaring to life in a symphony that vibrated through the lot, scattering gravel like confetti from a hard-won parade. The convoy snaked out onto Route 47, the asphalt unspooling under tires worn smooth by miles of purpose. Caleb rode pillion behind Marcus again, the wind whipping his hair, carrying the crisp bite of morning air, laced with the distant promise of rain. The desert unfolded in vast sweeps of ochre and shadow, Joshua trees standing sentinel like ancient watchers, their twisted limbs a reminder of endurance against the barren. Marcus's mind replayed the hospital room's dim glow, Elias's labored breaths, the vow extracted like a final breath. "Protect the veins, brother. for the ones who can't. That oath had birthed the iron vow, pulling wanderers from their solitary drifts into this rolling brotherhood, mending fractures where law turned blind. The reservation came into view by mid-morning, its homes bathed in sunlight that turned the tin roofs to mirrors of hope. Families gathered at the community center, the air alive with the chatter of voices and the savory steam of communal stew simmering over open fires, herbs mingling with the earthy scent of fresh-turned soil from a nearby garden. Elder Samuel met them at the gate, his silver braids catching the breeze, eyes crinkling with gratitude as the riders unloaded the remaining crates. Elena, the nurse, directed the flow into the clinic. Her hands steady now, the weariness in her posture eased by the tangible weight of aid secured. "Word from Redstone already," she said to Marcus, voice hushed amid the bustle. "Feds are moving, raids at dawn. Your proof hit home." Caleb helped stack boxes, his small arms straining but unyielding, the rhythm sinking him deeper into the crew's fold. Tyler ruffled his hair as they worked, the vet's grin broad. "Sharp eyes here turned the tide. Ever think of patching into the vow when you're taller?" The boy flushed, but pride lit his face, a spark that banished the loneliness of empty roads and absent fathers. For Marcus, watching from the shade of a cottonwood, it was redemption's quiet crest, the promise fulfilled not in glory, but in these small acts of preservation, shielding the vulnerable from the desert's hidden teeth. As noon approached, the horizon shimmered with heat, but a new rumble intruded, not engines, but the chop of helicopter blades slicing the sky. The crew tensed, hands drifting to pockets, until the craft descended, kicking up dust devils that swirled like celebratory spirits. State agents in windbreakers spilled out, badges flashing, faces set with purpose. Leading them was Grace, the auditor, her bun slightly askew from the flight, but her stride unerring. "Harlan's holed up at the quarry," she announced, voice carrying over the rotor's fade. "Tipped his hand trying to burn evidence. Your photos nailed the roots, the payoffs, whole rings crumbling." The words landed like justice's gavel, the air electric with finality. Marcus nodded, the weight lifting from his shoulders like fog burned by sun. "Ends clean?" Grace met his gaze. "As clean as it gets. No more ghosts on these roads." The agents coordinated with Samuel, securing the site for Harlan's extraction, while the riders stood vigil, a wall of leather and loyalty. Caleb edged closer to Marcus, whispering, "We did it, like the sign, saw it coming." Marcus knelt, the gravel warm under his boots, and clasped the boy's hand. "You did, son, reminded us all what watching out means." In that grip, the bonds sealed. A veteran's haunted path finding solace in mentorship, a boy's isolation yielding to unbreakable kin. By afternoon, the chopper lifted again. Harlan in cuffs visible through the bubble canopy, his empire reduced to a silhouette against the clouds. The reservation exhaled, voices rising in thanks, meals shared under the awning, stories exchanged like heirlooms, the scent of fry bread and laughter weaving through the air. The iron vow lingered till dusk, engines idling like patient guardians, before mounting up for the homeward leg. Caleb rode with them now, not as tag-along, but kin. The road ahead a canvas of cleared paths and honored words. As stars pricked the velvet sky, Marcus glanced back at the boy dozing against his back, the desert's whisper, a lullaby of closure. Elias's promise endured, not in echoes of war, but in this legacy of quiet stands, justice moral, family chosen, redemption's road forever guarded. The convoy faded into the night, headlights carving futures from the dark, a brotherhood's oath riding eternal. Thank you for riding along on this journey of courage and unbreakable promises. If these tales of honor and heart resonate with you, subscribe for more stories that light the way. Your support keeps the roads open for all.